Hey, Henderson, I see you. I assume other people are. There's everybody else.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good.
Morning, everybody. I think we're ready to begin the Governor's Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice first public forum. This is not going to be the last, but we wanted to have one early in our process, and we will have others later. And we'll also try to move them to different times of the day, respecting the fact that people have different work schedules and not everybody could participate during the workday. As you can see on the screen, a lot of different faces, and these are members of the task force, and people here represent a really broad swath of perspectives, and appropriately so, from people who are criminal justice reform advocates, justice-involved individuals, public defenders, prosecutors, sheriffs, police, line officers, mayors, county commissioners, advocates for victims, advocates for people with disabilities, a very wide and broad set of perspectives. At this point, I'll hand it off to my co-chair. I'm Josh Stein, the Attorney General, Associate Justice Anita Earls, for comments.
Thank you, Attorney General Stein. I also want to welcome everyone, our task force members and all of the members of the public who are on with us. We are here to listen, and we are all grateful to you for spending your time to share with us your views on the issues that this task force should be addressing and the types of solutions and policies that we should be looking at. So just a word about mechanics. If you are someone who has signed up to speak, don't be distressed that you don't see yourself. The way this process will work is that Ellen Spolar will call your name out, and then you should use the raise hand feature to help her locate you. She will then promote you to a panelist, and you will be visible. So when you enter the Zoom webinar, if you pin Ellen's video, you'll have a timer running to show you. We are unfortunately going to have to be strict with the 2 minutes. So every person will only get 2 minutes to speak, but you'll be able to see her video will count down that 2 minutes for you. If you have any issues, you can email Ellen, and her email is just the initial of her first name, so Spolar, SPOLAR, at ncdoj.gov. So I think with that, we can get started with our public hearing.
Wonderful.
First up,
Good morning. Ellen, will you call the person's name and tell them and show a clock for the 2 minutes?
yes.
Okay.
First up, we have Stanley Levine from Cary. Can you raise your hand? Great.
And Ellen, I don't see a clock, FYI.
Yes, I will start it once the person has been promoted.
Okay, great. And there's Mr. Levine. You can take yourself off the mute, Mr. Levine. Great. Please begin, sir.
I want to personally thank Mr. Stein and this task force for proactively putting together a great structure of the potential solutions. I have spent the better part of 50 years in some of the higher levels of our government doing analyses of problems. It is well known that problems and their underlying causes must be identified, analyzed, and validated before solutions are proposed. Not doing so can result in short-term, ineffective solutions. For example, if a person is sick, the doctor does not just try to fix the symptoms. The doctor tries to find the underlying cause and treat that in order to get a long-lasting and effective cure. The task force process must first address the specific North Carolina problems and their causes. These could vary widely by community. Any analysis to determine what are the current North Carolina race problems and their causes should include the following factors as a minimum: crime rate by race, violent crime rate by race, arrest rate by race, hostile police encounters by race, number of unarmed people by race killed by law enforcement officers. The factors of possible financial, educational, and workforce inequities should be addressed as possible causes, and the mitigation of these should be considered in the recommended solutions. It should be noted that the official definition of race does not include Hispanics and Latinos. The task force should consider all bias and inequities, including those due to race, sex, ethnicity, religion, age, class, etc.
Mr. Levine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ellen, who's next?
Next up, we have Sean McMillan of Fayetteville.
And Mr. McMillan, if you raise your hand, she'll find you and bring you into the participants so that you can address the task force. Great, nice to see you, Mr. McMillan.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Okay, please, you have the floor.
Good morning. My name is Sean McMillan. I'm a retired Army officer and educator and a social activist, also a native and current resident of Fayetteville, North Carolina. I appreciate the efforts of the Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice and efforts to address the harmful impacts of mass incarceration and prison industrial complex. We must do more to dismantle these systems because of the damage they have on citizens of North Carolina as a whole, but especially on Black and Brown communities for whom equal justice has never been a reality. For years, organizations like the North Carolina Statewide Police Accountability Network, NC-SPAN, has been laying the groundwork for this type of work in this fight for justice. Here we in Fayetteville are pushing hard for our city council to approve hire of no less than 4 full-time professional oversight practitioners and for establishment of a civilian police oversight authority, which will lay the groundwork for a subsequent volunteer citizen review board. We believe it's the type of solid, trust-building, common sense policy that will allow people to address grievances through a fair and impartial process. I strongly urge other organizations and municipalities across the state to consider employment of oversight practitioners. Beyond that, I'd like to encourage every leader that is a part of this process and anyone who cares about equity and justice to reach out to justice-impacted families and to make more space for qualitative analysis, anecdotal evidence, and a space for the personal stories of many of the local victims of police misconduct. The words "enough is enough" hit differently when you hear it from a Gerard Atkinson or a Rashad Everett, both local victims of alleged misconduct. The words "Black Lives Matter" When you hear them through the tears of Rolanda Bird or Allison Smotherman, family members who have lost loved ones to police violence also take on a new meaning. Leaders, if you can talk to your sheriffs and police chiefs daily, why be afraid to talk to the people who allege misconduct or who mourn the loss of family and friends to police shootings? As community advocates, their cries are the fuel for our fire. I thank you for your time and look forward to the actions that will be a result of this thoughtful convening. Thank you.
Mr. McMillan, thank you very much for your comments.
Next, we have Nicole Rose of Westfield. Let's try Rose Poole of Cedar Grove.
And Ms. Poole, you can just hit the raise hand function and then Ellen can see you. Same with you, Ms. Rose. If you're there, we'll come back to you.
Hello,
Hello.
I raised my hand. I'm Rose Poole.
Okay, great. Ellen, she's not showing up on my screen. I don't know if that's because I picked the wrong.
We can definitely hear you. We can't
see.
see you. Okay.
Yeah, your video may not be on, Ms. Poole, but you don't need your video to address us. So you can, I think we see you now.
Okay.
You have the floor, Ms. Poole.
Okay. My name is Rose Poole, and I live here in Orange County, Hillsborough, North Carolina. I have a problem with the criminal justice system here has been broken. The racial profiling, the harsher drug laws, when it comes to our Black males, our DSS system here needs to be looked into more fairly. I feel as though the prosecutors, law enforcement officers, including local and state federal government agents who prey on certain citizens. I'm hoping that we can fix that and change things around when it comes to that. And I feel like these organizations or our government, some of our government agencies need to be looked into more, because we do have a problem here in Orange County. And I thank you for the time that you allowed me to speak.
You're most welcome, Ms. Poole. Thank you for addressing the task force this morning.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good morning.
You too.
Next, we have Mr. Michael Banner of Winston-Salem.
Good morning.
Good morning. You have the floor, Mr. Banner.
Okay, thank you. My name is Michael Banner of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I am actually a 3-time felon, so I'm very striped up from this whole justice process. And when I look around and I see the harsh criminalization of our community, I see that it's not really a way out. I see that, you know, it's a continuous loop. And what I would like to see is some defunding of the police departments so that, you know, emphasis can be put more into a rites of passage for our young Black males and young females, so that we could be more acclimated towards, you know, what it would take to build out our culture and to you know, sustain families. Because right now, you know, the whole emphasis on locking somebody up has really, you know, fractured our families. So in saying all that, I think one quick measure we could do, if you could look at making it a task to legalize cannabis, marijuana, because, you know, just this small trite blip on the radar is really prohibiting our people from, you know, partaking in not only the financial benefit of growing these plants and, you know, this booming economy, but also as a quick fix measure of mental health. So those are quick things I would like to add on to this session.
Mr. Banner, thank you very much for your comments this morning.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Next, we have Miss Jennifer Marsh of Chapel Hill.
Ms. Marsh, we see you're on the screen. Your mute button is on. Perhaps you should unmute. Great. Are you there, Ms. Marsh?
Yes. Good morning. So I'm an attorney and policy advocate.
Okay.
My entire career has been dedicated to civil rights issues. And for the last 3 years, I've almost exclusively worked on bail and pretrial reform, partnering with a group of diverse advocates from around the state. Our North Carolina Bail Reform Working Group has been meeting monthly or bi-monthly since its inception. A policy subcommittee of our bail reform working group is made up of lawyers and advocates, and it has been entrenched in pretrial reform efforts. They drafted a pretrial reform rule, including a justification memo. That rule was submitted to this task force for consideration. I ask that you review this, and if you so find, recommend that rule for adoption to the general rules of court. The rule requires jurisdictions to follow the law as set out by our current North Carolina state statute and the recent Alamance bail case, Allison versus Allen. We hope the justification memo answers any questions about the rule, and we welcome the opportunity to address any additional questions not addressed in the memo. And as the state addresses bail and pretrial reform, it's imperative that we have alternatives to incarceration. I ask this task force recommend all jurisdictions in North Carolina have comprehensive pretrial service programs. These offices should be independent of the sheriff or probation offices. Currently, less than a quarter of our counties have pretrial service offices at all, and of those, many are intertwined with law enforcement offices or do not offer comprehensive services. These offices will likely need support in the form of people and funds to be successful. And please consider a recommendation that provides resources for them as well to get off the ground. I'm willing to assist in any way with this request and will submit a list of best practices for pretrial offices for you if you like to take up this subject. There are many other recommendations I'd like to see, such as requiring representation at first appearance and ensuring that first appearance happens within 48 hours. So this is an opportunity to make a real difference, and best of luck as you go down this road.
Ms. Marsh, thank you very much for your comments this morning and for your submissions.
Next, we have Miss Susan Pollard from Raleigh.
Great, Ms. Pollard. I see you're on mute.
Sorry. Good morning.
Good morning. The floor is yours.
My name is Susan Pollard, and I'm an attorney with Disability Rights North Carolina. Disability Rights is the state's protection and advocacy system for people with disabilities, and we're part of a nationwide network of protection and advocacy created by Congress to protect people with disabilities. Because there are so many people with disabilities in our prisons and jails, this is a target for our work. And I would like the task force to know that since 2012, disability rights, along with other mental health advocacy groups, worked in coalition with leadership at DPS to address the problem of unidentified and untreated disabilities in our prison system. This is important because people come out of prison, and if they're not treated in prison, then our communities are not safe. In addition, the prisons aren't safe when there's untreated mental illness, people with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities, and especially traumatic brain injuries are not identified and treated. So since 2012, this coalition worked to introduce crisis intervention training into our prison system, got experts to review and provide consultation, including Professor Art Beeler, who you'll hear from later. I see my time is ticking. What I want you to know is that 85% of the people who are placed in high security confinement, called HCON, are Black people. Many of these people are people who also have disabilities, and instead of being treated for their disability, they're being punished in the most cruel and restrictive way possible. 65% of the people that are in restrictive housing for control purposes, which is indefinite, meted out in 6-month periods of time, are Black, and 75% of people in modified housing. So we are ready to help the task force address this problem. It's a critical problem. I don't think the problem can be solved without looking into this, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Pollard, thank you very much.
Next up, we have Sierra Lindsay of Reedsville.
Hi, thank you for letting me be heard today. My name is Sierra Lindsay, and I am a fiance of a wrongly convicted, overly sentenced inmate that's currently incarcerated. And some of my suggestions would be overhauling the DA system, taking steps to fix erroneous errors leading to wrongful conviction, holding prosecution and police accountable, slow plea if DA does not have enough evidence to convict, charges need to be dropped, overhauling our prison system, stopping a lot of the cruel treatment to majority of the prisoners, do away with private prisons, better defense for our indigenous people, get rid of mandatory minimums or lower the percentage from 85 to 65, reduce harms of pretrial, narrowly limit who is jailable before conviction, and ensure appeal rights and speedy trial protections. And I think that some post-conviction rules need to be put in place because it's so easy for you to just start away for 60 and 70 years, but it's so hard for you to bring evidence back into court to get your case heard. So I think that we need to do better about our post-conviction cases. We do have a lot of wrongly convicted, overly sentenced people that have taken plea deals, and once you take the plea deal, you can only certain things you can raise. So I think that we need to do better about that to kind of end our mass incarceration, because mass incarceration level in North Carolina is huge, and it's just another form of slavery, and it's something needs to be done about that. And thank you for listening to me, and I hope that you hear some of these things.
Ms. Motley, thank you very much for your comments this morning.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Carlos Jones of Charlotte.
There, I see Mr. Jones. I think your mute button is on, Mr. Jones. Great, the floor is yours. Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Carlos Jones. I'm here in Charlotte, and I'm a prior police officer, so I'm very pro-police, but I'm also pro-citizen. And over the past decade or so, we've been seeing a lot of misconduct by police officers, and I think that there are some things that can be done to help improve this? And one of the things that I thought about was we need to get back to community-oriented policing. When I was a kid, everybody knew the police officers. They knew us by name. They knew our families. They knew who to go to if there was a problem in the neighborhood. A lot of officers are not from the areas, and they don't take out the time to get to know the people in their areas. And I feel that we need to get back to that because somewhere we lost that. The other thing I was talking about was, we need more of a ethics committee, someone maybe who works for DOJ or Attorney General Office, where they go out and conduct investigations, talk to people, take complaints from people, because a lot of people feel intimidated when they go to police departments to pick up complaint forms. And, when they show up to get a complaint form, a lot of times they're met with 3 or 4 officers, so they're intimidated by that. So I think we should have a better system where people can maybe file online or people follow up by investigating. The post certifications of law enforcement officers, those are the things that are above the unions, above the police departments. And I think they're, if I'm so correct, they're controlled by the state. So when it comes to post certifications, when you have officers or doing stuff wrong and stuff like that, maybe ask if they could have did something a different way. And if the answer is yes, then if they should be punished, then remove their certification. If the department's not going to hold them accountable and create transparency, then I say take their post certification. Then they can't go to another department, and then you don't have to worry about that officer. And the other thing,
Mr. Jones, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your 2 minutes are up, and very much appreciate your
I'm
comments.
sorry. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
All right.
Next, we have Miss Elizabeth Crudup from Hartnett County.
And before she speaks, I just want to say to any of the speakers, if you have ideas that you weren't able to communicate because the time expired, please know that you can email us whatever additional thoughts you have, and they will be considered, even if you are not able to address us by voice. Ms. Crudup, yes, the floor, your mute is on at the moment. Ms. Crudup, you're on. Yeah, now you're.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, and the floor is yours, Ms. Crudup.
Okay, Elizabeth Crudup. Look, we are out here outside Lumberton Correctional. People are dying, people are sick, people are getting sicker. They're living like animals out here. It's like the Holocaust, and all we can talk about is future policies. We need to act immediately. You as a task force, this should be your #1 priority. This should be your #1 goal. These human beings are not throwaway. You need to act. Your mandate affords you the opportunity to call a vote immediately. You don't have to wait. There's a vote by the majority of you to go and relieve these men who are dying, who are sick, who are infected, who are in hot boxes and confined to their beds, worse than dogs in a shelter. At least the dogs in a shelter get to exercise. If these were animals, we would not treat them like this. These are human beings. The task force is not doing anything to address the injustice that brought them about. The death of George Floyd brought about the racial inequities. I have emailed a list of names. I have through the website you have. Please free those men. Free those men. They have been suffering for years and years and years. We know the tragedy of George Floyd just brought about to the public forum what a devastation the life of an African-American male is in this country. And we are asking you to act. Stop just talking about it. What you did last week was nothing. No life was saved by those actions. Save a life. Free these men. Let them out. Free Shannon Yamudi, free Ronnie Long, free all the 7 names that we sent out, free all these people now sitting here in Lumberton Correctional next to concentration camp situations. Do not just talk about it. This is not a meeting of just talking. Eric Hooks had already called his people to look at their policies. So had Terry Beasley. All that is being done. What you guys need to do is go ahead and save the lives of these
Ms.
men and women. Thank
Ms.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Crudup, for your comments.
Next, we have Miss Misha Evans of Raleigh.
Good morning, Ms. Evans. We can see you're on the screen. Your mute button is on.
Good morning.
Great. The floor is yours, Ms. Evans.
Good morning. My name is Misha Evans, and I'm a policy attorney for Disability Rights North Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. You are not addressing racial equity in the criminal justice system if you are not simultaneously addressing racial equity in our schools. The biggest issue contributing to racial inequality in our education system is the failure to appropriately identify students with IEPs under the specific learning disability category. Early screening, appropriate identification of disability, and high quality instruction are all crucial. Programs to address specific learning disabilities would benefit all students with disabilities, but they would particularly benefit students of color. In North Carolina, in 2016 and 17, Black students comprised 25% of the student population and 31% of the students with IEPs, yet 44% of the students who had emotional disabilities and 44% of the students who had intellectual disabilities. Identification under emotional disability and intellectual disability can lead to lower expectations, stigma, more restrictive classroom placements, and resentment for acting out, particularly for students that have been miscategorized. Suggested solutions for this problem are a specific learning disability screening for all first graders statewide, a training program statewide for teaching reading with fidelity, and having a literacy coach in every elementary school. Disability Rights North Carolina is an expert on the issues affecting North Carolinians with disability, and we are available to work with you on this issue further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans.
Next, we have Deborah Jordan.
Ms. Jordan, we see you're on the screen now. Good morning. Your mute button is on. Ms. Jordan, your mute button is on. Let's see, the mute button on my screen is in the very lower left corner. Mute, unmute, and if you click it, it will unmute you, and then you can address the committee, address the task force. Ellen, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I will try it again.
Let me just address, Ms. Jordan, that to the extent we can figure out the technical difficulties, and we'll try to get you back on so that you can address the task force.
Next, we have Mr. John Shubert. Shubert, excuse me.
Good morning, Mr. Shubert.
Good morning. Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak before the task force. I'm John Shubert with Collaborative Resolution Services. I've been doing staff development trainings for law enforcement agencies for 26 years, nationally and internationally, and have written extensively for the American Correctional Association and American Jail Association national publications. We are literally killing our police with high rates of heart attack, divorce, alcohol abuse, high blood pressure, suicide, and a short life expectancy of 22 years. That means half of our officers will die before the age of 54 and half will die after the age of 54. What is the cause? Toxic stress. The most damaging stress does not come from operations. It comes from the work culture within the police department. If we do not address this issue, we will be frustrated with the outcome of our efforts. If we change the work culture, we will improve officer effectiveness, staff well-being, and community relations. It is important to change the duties of our officers so that they are trained and equipped to do what we ask them to do. Policy changes are important, but policy changes are not enough. The work culture will override any new policies, as I'm sure you sheriffs and sheriffs are well aware. So how do you change the work culture? Not by traditional training methods. Officers and other staff need to be trained in emotional intelligence skills, and the lecture format of training cannot effectively accomplish this. Neuroscience teaches us this. A different design in training must be utilized. There is one that has proven to be effective at helping law enforcement agencies transform their work culture. It is the immersive experiential staff development training methodology, which is a 3-day emotional intelligence inoculation for both line staff and supervisors. Secretary Hooks has experienced this in his department, which is called Team Building Attitude Conflict Transformation. I would be glad to share more information about this when I have more than 2 minutes. Thank you.
Mrs. Shubert, thank you for addressing us this morning.
Next, we have Mr. Dave Thomas of Apex.
Morning, Mr. Thomas. Welcome. You're presently on mute. Mr. Thomas, you're on mute. If you hit the lower left corner, the mute button should unmute you, and then you can address the task force. There you go. Floor is yours, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. Again, my name is Dave Thomas. As a former Raleigh police officer, child protective investigator, and concerned citizen, I would like to address one of the root causes of the anger in our streets right now. North Carolina's overly punitive laws relating to marijuana specifically, I, along with many other North Carolinians, would like to encourage all of you to prioritize legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana for adults 21 years old and older. Prohibition rewards criminals and ensures that production and sales are completely unregulated. Unlike licensed businesses in states where sales for personal use are legal, illicit marijuana sellers operate virtually everywhere and have no incentive not to sell to minors. Taxing and regulating marijuana would help to displace the underground marijuana market and reduce the number of marijuana-related arrests by police. Also, it would regulate sellers and create barriers to teen access while boosting the fairness and efficiency of the criminal justice system. The ineffective war on drugs declared in the early 80s is over, as the three strikes policy, particularly relating to the simple possession of marijuana, disproportionately and most negatively impacted our communities of color, incarcerating them in record numbers and trapping many in an inescapable debtor prison to probation and back to prison cycle. Evidence proves the lack of actual rehabilitation of inmates, educational opportunities and resources for programs that will never significantly reduce the rate of recidivism in our state. We must acknowledge why our prisons have been seen as a modern day slavery by many. You have the power to do more. You must be brave enough to have the discussion and take bold action required. When you legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana for adults 21 and older, you will restore hope for many and help to restore law and order in our streets. I speak on behalf of brothers and sisters of all colors, including our heroic social workers, teachers, and first responders in the great state of North Carolina. Thank you very much.
Mr. Thomas, thank you very much for addressing us this morning.
We have Mr. Robert Dawkins of Charlotte.
Hello, Mr. Dawkins. Welcome. You're presently on mute. There you go.
Now.
You're fine. You may speak. Thank you.
First, my name is Robert Dawkins. I'm the political director for Action NC. I wanted to say thank you for these first 3 suggestions, recommendations that the task force has come up with. Out of those, the one that we're most concerned with is the actual implementation of duty to intervene. To give you an example, we pushed for duty to intervene for the past year and a half. Finally, when CMPD introduced its duty to intervene policy, it set a threshold for officers to intervene, and the threshold is very high. For our policy, CMPD says that an officer would have to experience shock of his conscience to intervene. And we're hoping that you will be giving instruction on what the duty to intervene policy will look like, because one of the main reasons we wanted duty to intervene was our Dan Queers Franklin case here in Charlotte, where an officer gave commands that were misunderstood. So if it's a threshold included, like shock your conscience, that would not cover all of the duty to intervene type situations. So we hope you'll give them instructions. Lastly, we're still hoping that you are going to call for citizen review boards across the state. We've introduced legislation, House Bill 99 in 2015, House Bill 165 in 2017, another bill for Charlotte in 2019, none of which have ever made it out of the Judiciary Committee. So we hope that you will use your influence to allow all cities in the state to have citizens review boards with subpoena power, investigatory power, and decision-making power. And again, we at Action NC thank you for what you're doing and look forward to what you will be doing. And thank you for your time.
Mr. Dawkins, thank you very much for your time this morning as well.
Next, we have Tabitha Curry Bay of Gardner.
Great. Ms. Curry Bay, welcome this morning. You're presently on mute. If you unmute in the lower left, there you go.
There you. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
My first time.
You got it under control. You have the floor. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Tabitha Curry Bay. I'm just an ordinary citizen. I happen to be married to someone who's incarcerated, has been for the last 19 years. My concern is mandatory minimums. Again, my husband was sentenced to 45 years in prison, has completed 19 years of those. And I'm a little disheartened by that. When he first got sentenced, I didn't know him then. I met him while he was incarcerated. And for the life of me, I don't understand why he's still there, because he has definitely turned his life around, and he's a model citizen. Other inmates look up to him. Officers, use him to encourage and uplift other inmates that they see falling by the wayside. So again, the mandatory minimum, is it designed to rehabilitate someone or humiliate people? Because again, I don't understand it. 45-year sentence. What is and can be done to help offset this sentence? And I'm not saying when someone does a crime that they shouldn't be punished. I'm not saying that at all. But 45 years, that's a little excessive to me. So again, and as far as defunding the police department, I don't agree with that. We need our police officers. I hold our police officer dear and near to my heart. I've always wanted to be a police officer, but I'm too old to do that now. So I like to continue to support them. But I think we need to take another look at the sentences here in North Carolina. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
And thank you for speaking, Ms. Curry Bay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. W. Russell Robinson of Durham.
Welcome, Dr. Robinson. You can unmute yourself. There you go. You have the floor, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Thank you, first of all, for your work. I know it is important. Before I begin, I want to come to you not just as a professor of mass communication, but I also come to you as a person who is a victim of racial profiling by our police. The words still sting. I asked a police officer, a Caucasian police officer, to keep an eye on my son while I went to the grocery store went to the gas station to pay for gas. And his response was, "I am a police officer, not a babysitter." So with that, I look at the notion that this police officer did not see us as human, but instead viewed us as not well enough to hunt or police. This image of how, I guess, Black people are interpreted by police comes to us from our media system. And I noticed by today, I don't see anyone from our media structures on your panel. I wish I did. I think it is important that we address the intersections of law enforcement and the perception of media stereotypes. This was done in 1968 with the Kerner Commission, and 50 years later, and looking at the research that I conduct as well, we still have not yet to get it right, but I do hope that we're able to do that. Possible solutions, I've heard some today so far that I think are great. I think another solution along the lines of media is how we look at the media present in the first 10 minutes of their newscast stories of Black crime, whether it be Black victimization or Black criminality. I think the other thing that we also must consider too is the notion of having police live in the neighborhoods they actually police. I think it's important that if police officers are entrusted with looking and serving and protecting over people, that they have the gravitas of the people that they protect as well. Again, I thank you so much for your opportunity, my opportunity to present to you today, and I wish you Godspeed in the important work that you are pursuing. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Robinson. Appreciate your comments.
Next, we have Alan Griezmann of Morgan.
There you are, Mr. Griezmann. Welcome this morning. If you unmute yourself in the lower left corner, we look forward to your comments. There you go. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, good morning. Again, I appreciate you guys taking time to listen to me this morning. All the great comments left by the public. These task force that you guys have come up with are great. I also want to thank the officers that are present. The fact that you guys are minorities, I think, is important as well. I would like the task force to consider more minorities in the police force, just to help, look out for each other. We're all people at the end of the day. And in my opinion, in God's eyes, we're all the same. And we don't need to defund the police. We need the police. I do think the court system needs to be looked at a little further. I have unfortunately been the victim of being wrongfully served with papers just because I had the same name as another gentleman in another county. This is, of course, something very frustrating. I lost a day's work, had to go to Buncombe County. I'm in Burke, which you guys know is about an hour away. Sat in court all day for something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. Having folks to understand that's not easy. All of you have been to court, and you guys know when you get there, you can't really speak to the judge at first. You have to wait your turn. I just think the police aren't perfect, but none of us are. And I do agree with the Citizens Review Board. I think there does need to be some oversight of the police, but they're only a part of this picture. And again, we all need to be treated the same. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your work. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Griezmann.
Next, we have Mr. Stephen Bailey.
Welcome, Mr. Bailey. You can unmute yourself and you have the floor. Yeah, unfortunately, you're still on mute. In the lower left corner is that mute unmute button. There you go. The floor is yours, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. My comments primarily relate to work group number 4, item number 4, reinstating parole, readdress for long-term sentences, second look act, especially retroactively. While mercy and empathy are rightfully considered on sentences of long-term or life incarceration, especially if the person being sentenced is a young adult, I believe sweeping reform to reduce long-term sentences or granting parole is not a responsible act, nor is it justice for victims. As you reform the system, I request that you also consider the impact and rights of victims and their families. Tomorrow marks the 12th anniversary of the murder of our son, who at age 20 was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by 6 young men, some who had previous felony convictions. There are indicators that at least 3 of those involved had antisocial personality disorders, something for which there is no cure. Science tells us that antisocial personality disorders can be diagnosed at 18, and indicators can be forming as early as age 8, and 80% of them develop the first symptoms by age 11. Behaviors include social irresponsibility, exploitive, and guiltless consciousness. Some with these tendencies will continue to commit crimes if not stopped. Statistics tell us that our prisons have a high population of individuals who have these disorders with a high rate of recidivism. There are people in prison who should not be there. However, I also know that sweeping reform can unleash predictable and dire consequences. For some inmates, regardless of ethnicity, to reduce sentence or grant parole can have a horrible outcome for the community and the victims. I hope you consult with mental health professionals, victims, family members, and don't just rely on recommendations from attorneys and fellow legislators. I also hope you will add victims to your work groups to give you better insight into the long-term effects serious crimes has on families. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, thank you for your comments, and we all are very sorry for your loss.
Next, we have Mr. Lee Wellborn.
Morning, Mr. Wellborn.
Morning. I'm sorry I'm having to call y'all from the car. My wife and son decided he wants to come out today.
Well, I hope they're driving.
Well, they're in the hospital with COVID. I can't go in, so I have to sit out here.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, best wishes to you and your family. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. I want to just address a few things. I represent Lex Loki Labs. We have a few software options that I really would like for the state to take a look at. One is considered called UPlea. It's an online adjudication service. It allows prosecutors to set rules that are determined of who gets plea offers. It's more equitable. Plea agreements across similar cases. It's also leveling the playing field for all, for people that can't afford attorneys, the same as people who can afford attorneys. The second software I'd like y'all to take a look at is our pre-arrest diversion software that's had great success in Orange County. Police are the first contact within the community. Our software allows them to, not only if it is a charge that they have to have, it allows them to do a diversion, but they can also look at things such as, people with housing situations, education, job, substance abuse. It allows them to have the resources connected to them to put them into the places that they need to go to get help. So these are all customized programs straight for the individual. There's tons of analytics involved with both softwares, so this information can be easily passed out for any watchdog groups or people wanting to know what's going on with law enforcement. And I just think the state should help either fund or give resources to counties that want to put these kind of programs in place. And thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilbur. Good. Best wishes to your family.
Thank you, sir.
Next is David Crispel of Durham.
Good morning, Mr. Crispel.
Good morning. I'm Dave Crispel. I'm the Executive Director of Jubilee Home, and here in Durham, where we provide supportive housing for transition age young people returning to Durham from incarceration. I'm also on the local reentry council here in Durham, where we know that about 750 people are going to return to Durham. I guess that's maybe pre-COVID numbers. We know about 750 individuals will return to Durham from incarceration in 2020, and about a third of those are going to need housing and the wraparound supportive services that accompany that. We also know that of those 250 high needs individuals, a high majority of them are Black and Brown community members. I'd like to argue or advocate at least for equity through transparency and flow of information. The state put a lot of effort in and resources towards setting up LRCs in local communities. But for those LRCs to function properly and be able to operate effectively and efficiently, we need some more cooperation from the state. We need inmates to be moved to regional facilities where they can be contacted and reached prior to their release so that we can understand better their needs. And we need a list of who is actually coming back to the community. Right now, service providers like us rely on sort of a word of mouth in the community, which means people show up on our porch literally out of homelessness due to breakdowns in service providers because we have no idea who's coming home. And therefore, we can't provide services that are actually available because we don't know when and where someone is coming to. So I'd like to advocate for a smoothing of those information pathways that counties can be more prepared to receive individuals returning home and empower them with the services they need. And thank you guys for the work you're doing on behalf of those who can't have voice because they're incarcerated.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin.
Next, we have Sally Simpson.
I was going to advocate for. Oh.
Good morning, Ms. Simpson. You're presently on mute. Yeah, there. Yeah, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Sally Simpson, and I'm an Episcopal deacon in the Diocese of North Carolina. First off, I want to thank the task force for the work that you've done so far. And as a person of faith, I must speak out against injustice and fight for the oppressed. I speak out today in support of revising and reforming the cash bail system. As people know, as everyone knows, persons of color and the poor are disproportionately impacted by the bail system as it is currently assigned. I urge the task force to adopt alternative methods of pretrial processes for the accused and to ensure representation at their first appearance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Simpson.
Next, we have Jay Renee of Rocky Mount.
I'm not sure if Jay,
you hear me?
yes, Ms. Renee, we can't, oh, I'm sorry, just got muted again. If you can unmute. We heard you for 1 second, but we're not hearing you now. In the lower left corner is a unmute button. There you go. We can hear you now.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Renee, and what I want to speak to you guys about is the escalation of force policy within the police. We do know, or some of us probably know, that there is a use of force continuum that is in place for the police. However, we definitely need reform and probably add some standard operating procedures. The reason why I say this is, even though this is a time when you watch independent video from cell phone footage, and sometimes some officers aren't following the use of force continuum. This is one of the major reasons why there's a disconnect between police and citizens, and there's a distrust, because when officers seem to be and are breaking the law, there is no consequence. So we definitely need more consequences for officers that don't follow the use of force continuum. Excuse me, when I am a two-time Iraqi war veteran, So when we were deployed and even when we were stateside, we had consequences and rules. And a lot of times the things that kept us from doing the wrong thing or reacting on emotion was the fact that there were consequences. We couldn't just do what we wanted because there was something that would come from that. So I believe that if we have consequences when the use of force continuum is violated, we will see a difference in our police rank. We know that not all police officers are bad, and we need to assist our good officers in getting the bad people out of the ranks. We can't stop a racist person from getting in. We can't stop an undisciplined person from getting in. But with consequences in place that happen no matter what, there's no good old boy system. There needs to be a uniform code, of consequences when you break the rules. This will assist in getting our ranks cleaned up. This will assist in having the public have respect and gain trust in the police force. And I think it will assist good cops in being able to do their job without repercussions. And we also need to look at the immunity law.
Ms. Renee, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but the 2 minutes are over. And if you have additional comments, please email them to us. But we very much appreciated hearing your comments on accountability this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Eric Johnson of Raleigh.
Ellen, I don't see him yet. Is he on?
No, I promoted to panelist, but we can circle back around.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, we didn't see you. There you are. Very good. If you unmute, you can, thank you. Please address the task force, Mr. Johnson. All
right. Am I
there
here?
you are. Yes, you are. I'm sorry. Yes, please.
All right, I was excited. I saw I got promoted to panelist and then I got kicked out of the system. So didn't know how that was going to work out.
Apologies.
That's all right. That's all right. I was afraid I was going to be coming out of left field, but a few minutes ago, my brother Alan and sister Sally just brought up faith briefly in their comments, and just wanted to speak very briefly to the role of religion in this whole process that we're all working through together. So we can figuratively take off our titles and badges and uniforms figuratively here and just think about how this applies to all of us. I'm sharing from a statement from the Baha'i community of the United States. And it goes, religion, an enduring source of insight concerning human purpose and action, has a key role to play in this process. All faith communities recognize that we are essentially spiritual beings. All proclaim some version of the golden rule to love others as we do ourselves. Take, for example, the following passage from the Baha'i scriptures in which God addresses humanity. Know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times in your hearts how ye were created. Since we have created you all from one same substance, it is incumbent on you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land, that from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. Thank you so much for allowing me to have some time, and thanks for your service and for your time on this very long Zoom meeting. I know what it's like, so thank you.
Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for your words. At this point, my fellow co-chair, Justice Anita Earls, will take over moderating this public forum. Justice Earls.
Thank you. So, Ellen, who do we have next?
We have Kathy Greggs of Fayetteville.
Okay, Ms. Greggs, if you could unmute yourself. There you go.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes.
How are you?
Good,
I
thank
want
you.
to first thank you, everyone, for allowing everyone to come and speak and give their 2 minutes of comments to input for the best enrichment and enhancement of our community. My name is Kathy Greggs. I am the co-founder and president of Fayetteville Police Accountability Community Task Force. We had already presented to our city officials here in Fayetteville the CPOA with civilian oversight. It is a civilian police oversight authority along with the Citizen Review Board that allows the citizens to have the independence, oversight, and confidence in their police. It also provides and supports and protects the civil rights of people, increase confidence in police, and help manage risk. We are trained in NACOL, me and our founder. We would like to bring the training here to our state in different cities and counties so people can understand, as well as implementing a civilian oversight board for each individual city. We also are willing to come down and train you all on NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. The reason why we want to do this as well with other 5 organizations like REPS, which is Kerwin Pittman's organization, as well as Save Our Sons, as well as Emancipate North Carolina, is because we believe, based on statistics, that this civilian oversight board will assist with less lawsuits, as well as we will manage and comprehensive reporting of police. We also are looking into the immunity bill, qualified immunity bill for police to implement here in North Carolina. We will be writing a letter to Governor Cooper based off of qualified immunity, so this can also be implemented in the police reform bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. And let me remind for people who may not have been on initially, that when we let you in as a panelist, you may have to unmute yourself. I think you come in as muted. And also let me remind everyone, if you have additional materials that you want to submit to us, you can do that through the task force website, which is at www.ncdoj.gov/TREC, TREC. So Ellen, who's our next person?
Next, we have Jennifer Rudolph.
Okay, Ms. Rudolph, if you will unmute yourself. There you go.
It just takes a minute to come up. Thank you for the opportunity to address the task force. I'd like to speak about the law in North Carolina, which restricts ex-felons from voting until they've completed their terms of probation. This has been rooted in well-documented unconstitutional racism since it was enacted in 1901. And the State Board of Elections investigated 441 instances of ex-felons voting in the 2016 election cycle before their sentence was completed, and confirmed there was no documented procedure in which felons were informed of when their voting rights would be restored. And so the Board of Elections sent a letter to entities in the criminal justice system recommending changes to voter forms and processes that were partially implemented in 2017. Yet, knowing all of this, the district attorney in Hope County pursued charges against Lanisha Bratcher and 3 others for voting in 2016 while on probation. And this is a clear case of racial bias in the North Carolina criminal justice system, where 68% of those ex-felons accused of voting are Black. And it's evidence of a systemic failure. Lanisha Bratcher was never notified of her inability to vote because there were no systems in place to make sure the legal requirements were explained. But despite that, the Hope County DA not only chose to charge Bratcher and 2 others, but added additional charges just last month, only 2 days after George Floyd's memorial service in Hope County. I asked that the task force examine the racist origins of the law disenfranchising people in the criminal justice system and examine the disparate impact of that law. I ask that you recommend voting rights be expanded, to the greatest extent possible, and that clear policies are implemented so no one who's legally disenfranchised is unclear about their ability to vote. Lanisha Bratcher has paid her debt to society, has been working to turn her life around, but because of a century-old system that was designed to fail her and other Black people, and racial bias in prosecutorial discretion.
Ms. Rudolph, thank you so much. I'm afraid your time has expired, but thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Rashad Everett of Fayetteville.
Mr. Everett, we see you, but you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, I filed a complaint with the office of the DOJ in 2019 about police misconduct, and was told that your office does not handle police misconduct, only for the office to pick it up for prosecution after there was a bar complaint filed against Billy West, who was a member on the NCDOG Special Prosecution Panel. How do you plan to rectify issues like so and look into allegations and evidence that has been presented against police misconduct? There seems to be a certain thing that's going on across North Carolina where a lot of the citizens are not receiving any help or any assistance from DOJ when they have issues with police misconduct. And police misconduct seems like it is the thing that is definitely brewing up America right now. So how do we plan on attacking police misconduct to make a better America? That's pretty much my question.
Well, we're here to listen. So if you have any further comments, you have 48 seconds left.
Well, I mean, it's pretty much clear and cut. I mean, I don't have to talk the whole time, but that's something that I wanted to bring to the air to see if it can be rectified. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Thank you so much for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have Maria Perry of Durham.
It's time to end civil asset forfeitures. Taking money or other property from people who have not been charged with or convicted of a crime is wrong. The Federal Equitable Sharing Program allows our law enforcement agencies to get back up to 80% of the money they participate in seizing from innocent people. This is wrong because it incentivizes policing for profit. It unevenly affects minorities and the working class. And it's wrong because the North Carolina Constitution requires forfeited money to be used to support our public schools. Since the year 2000, North Carolina's state and local law enforcement officials have received over $200 million through the Federal Equitable Sharing Program. That's $200 million that came from people not charged or convicted of a crime, and that's $200 million that was diverted to law enforcement agencies, not given to our schools. Even worse, studies show minorities and the working class are the usual targets of the searches and seizures that result in forfeiture. These are easy communities to target because the people are usually unable to afford an attorney or not entitled to an attorney if they cannot afford one because they've not been charged with a crime and are, like most people, unable to handle the complex federal forfeiture process alone. Many North Carolina law enforcement agencies participate in equitable sharing, but some of the most active are the SBI, the State Highway Patrol, the Wake County Sheriff's Office, the Raleigh PD, and the Durham PD. Our state and local leaders must end civil asset forfeiture and ban equitable sharing as against public policy. Only where a criminal conviction has been obtained and after hearing before a judge should forfeiture be an option. I appreciate you all allowing me to speak today, and I know there are some people on this committee who already are aware of it, and I hope that we can get some real change on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perry.
I would like to circle back around and see if Deborah Jordan of Tarboro is able to join.
Ms. Jordan, we can see you. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you. I figured it out. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councilwoman Deborah Jordan from the great town of Tarboro in Edgecombe County. And I represent Ward 6. And over the years, I've seen a disparity in families having to pay large fees and fines for their under 18-year-olds. I know recently they changed the age. I had spoken to Attorney General Josh Stein about that at the Black Alliance session last year. But, you know, these families generally can't, you know, barely afford to, in my ward anyway, paid regular household stuff. And I hate that the kids are getting into trouble, but the fees ultimately fall back on the parents. And when they're imposed, I wonder if that is taken in consideration, you know, and it's just bad. You know, they're struggling to pay these fees and fines, and the kids are want their freedom. But, you know, I think some kind of work ethic things where they can work the money off should be imposed, especially for the young ones, so they can earn money and pay it. And because there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of debris on the highways. But I was just saying that, you know, the families are strapped, where youth is imposed, the fees is imposed on the youth, but then the families are the ones ultimately having to pay for it. So I was just wondering if something could be remedied about that, as well as part of their sentencing, make sure they get their GED or have to attend school. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jordan, for sticking with us. We're glad we got to hear from you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carolyn Graham of Charlotte.
Ms. Graham, we can see that you've joined us, but you're on mute. There should be a way to, in the lower left-hand bottom part of your screen, a way to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Can you see me?
We can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, my name is Carolyn Graham, and I'm sitting here with my daughter, Carol Graham, who knows this situation as well as me. So is it okay if I allow her to explain our situation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, hello, everyone. My name is Carol Graham, and today I actually wanted to talk about, excuse me, wrongful convictions as well as police misconduct. So in 2007, my brother was arrested on was arrested for a trafficking charge. He was actually set up by 2 narcotic police officers here in Charlotte, North Carolina. The officers actually took a kilogram of cocaine out of a property control room, and they actually charged him with trafficking when in fact it was an unlawful police drug sale. The actual operation was actually for a confidential informant that was facing 32 years in federal prison. The actual officer set up the deal to assist that confidential informant, and we later found out that the confidential informant was facing 32 years and ended up serving 8 because of the assistance from the 2 narcotics officers. We later found that my brother was actually convicted of conspiracy, but we later found out through the actual clerk of Superior Court here, Lisa Chin Gary, that he was not indicted. So we're dealing with like fabrication of evidence for this reverse drug sting. They never got authority to actually conduct the actual operation. We have been actually trying to fight this. We've actually submitted numerous motions, habeas, everything we possibly can. And what's problematic is that Charlotte or Mecklenburg County does not have to submit their records to the state. The police pretended to be drug dealers. They perjured themselves under oath on the night of the arrest, stating that my brother sold them drugs when in fact it was a unlawful, illegal drug sting operation from CMPD.
Ms. Graham, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately the 2 minutes has expired.
Okay, thank you. I do apologize. Thank you.
No apology needed. And just a reminder, more extensive written comments can be submitted via our website. So please go there and you can expand on what you've told us. Thank you.
That'll be awesome. That'll be awesome. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Katrina Hayes.
There you go, Ms. Hayes.
Hello. I will read you a letter I wrote last year. Dear Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, I hope you are doing great. Thank you for your time at the Black History Month celebration at St. Augustine University. I wanted to follow up with you on two topics I asked the question on: right to be heard and rule of law. On July 1st, 2016, my minor son with a disability had a mock trial set up in a small community college room by Cumberland County Schools. The case was scheduled to be at a courthouse until I notified the board of my son's abuse in the schools. 4 bailiffs were arranged to be on the side of me as an intimidation tactic. I was threatened to be arrested for pursuing our rights. There were no witnesses invited. I was awestruck when I realized my due process rights had been violated. It seems it wasn't enough to know your child had been harmed. Further injury was done when the rights of a former guardian ad litem, myself, were taken because of skin color. Years later, and a new diagnosis of PTSD that my son has, we haven't received justice. I reached out to Reverend Marvin Connolly for a resolution to no avail. I'm requesting that you reach out to Marvin Connolly and inform him of the error. I understand no one can be made to do anything. There comes a time when critical thinking, decency, and respect must surface to make way for a healthy and safe society. For our advocacy, we have experienced a number of retaliatory acts. The most recent was CPS coming to my home to blame me for the abuse for these unfounded claims. I'm told my son has to be supervised or sent to a foster care. There has been no order, no petition. If the courts are not following the rule of law, but it's not being implemented, how do you get justice? Who can handle the situation? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes, for sharing that with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Shamalata Brown of Fayetteville.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Shamalata Brown. I'm here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I am a mental health advocate for those that cannot and are afraid to speak for themselves. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, more than half of those that are in criminal justice system suffer from a mental illness. With the falling out of mental health institutes in the 20th century in the United States, law enforcement and correctional facilities have inadvertently become the largest providers of mental health related services. In 1955, psychiatric beds were 300 per one person. In 2005, there was one psychiatric bed for every 3,000. Today, the nation's largest mental health warehouse are in jails in the major metropolitan areas, not hospitals, producing more persons with mental illness in jails than in mental health institutions. Despite a growing movement to encourage law enforcement to receive basic mental health training. Law enforcement officers are not credentialed mental health providers and are therefore ill-equipped to serve the primary mental health provider in these circumstances. Given the increasing trend for individuals with mental illness becoming incarcerated, mental health providers must play a critical role in changing the current system. I say all of this to say that we are in need of mental health providers in the prison systems, in the facilities. It should be a requirement that those that are in law enforcement have more than one mental health training out there in the field. And if they cannot get that, I feel that some of their funding should be set aside, that psychiatric help can be given to those with mental illness, because it's unfair and it's inhuman. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Timothy Emery of Charlotte.
Everyone,
All right,
go ahead.
I'm a criminal defense attorney in Charlotte, have been for the last 17 years, and I want to provide you a perspective from what I see every day. In my honest opinion, we can't nibble around the edges and reform our way out of fundamentally racist systems that are rooted in white supremacy. And policing and prosecutors and the courts form a criminal punishment bureaucracy that does just that. We need substantive, comprehensive, dynamic change if we want to turn a racist system into an anti-racist system. I want to talk about two things in specific: pretrial detention, pretrial services, electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring is not an acceptable alternative to locking someone up. It's continued surveillance. It's punishment. I have people that wear this monitor for years awaiting their cases to be resolved, and every minute of their day is governed by the police. The same people who are accusing them of doing the crime are the people who are overseeing this monitor and unilaterally decide if they violated the terms and go back to jail. It's extremely stressful. I sit in court and watch prosecutors vigorously argue that my client's bond should not be reduced because he's a danger to the society. Then 2 months later, turn around and give a plea offer that says, you were presumed innocent, but now if you plead guilty to the thing that we believe you did, you're safe enough to be let out and we'll give you probation. It's intellectually dishonest. It's about coercing pleas. It's much harder to get people to plead guilty to things if they're out of custody. Look at opendatapolicing.com for disparities in police officer contacts with Black and brown communities. In Charlotte, Operation Hornet's Nest, I represented someone. They targeted 59 people for drugs and guns, and 56 of them were African American.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emery.
Thank you.
Next, we have Zanab Balach from Raleigh.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you for passing my name is Dana Baloch. Thanks for passing the resolutions last week. I think there are a few more things that we could do immediately to really impact racial equity in the criminal justice system in North Carolina. One thing would be really enforcing, enforcing marijuana prohibition is in itself unfair and unnecessary, and enforcing it during the global pandemic is even more so. So encouraging states to really deprioritize the enforcement of cannabis criminalization amid this coronavirus pandemic. And this is something that could also immediately release some prisoners from prisons around the state. And we know that, Black people are 3.3 times more likely to be arrested than white people in North Carolina for low-level marijuana offenses. And one other, and to expand on that, I really want to make the point that racial equity transcends just white and Black people. This task force does not include anyone from the Indigenous community, the Latinx community, and Asian and Muslim community members, not politicians. So to really think about how that impacts and looking at things like how we work with the Joint Terrorism Task Force to really criminalize Muslims in this state, as well as our River Detention Center and the amount of, it's been cited by the human rights, it's been cited by the UN Human Rights to have multiple violations. So we really need to transcend what racial equity in the criminal justice system looks like to more than just white and Black. And I encourage us to become more diverse on this force.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
I'm going to circle back around and see if Sidra Hannah of Charlotte is available.
Oh, you were unmuted for a minute there. Can you unmute again? There you go. Yeah, we should be able to hear you.
My objective is I stay with the
So Ms. Hannah, I had to interrupt you, but nothing's coming through. I don't know if there's any other way you can connect through your voice, but we're just not really hearing you.
Sidra will circle back around. Next, we have Alan Longman.
Okay,
Hello,
Mr.
do you hear me?
Longman.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yes, hi, I'm right here. I have a,
So put it where we're on the task force thing. We'll be gone.
hello?
Yes, we
you have
can
an
hear you.
officer coming over to us in the car. We're over by the Wilmington Corrections thing. And right when I'm ready to talk, I got two officers coming in on us. Anyway, the reason why I'm talking is that the Wilmington Corrections Facility is where they house the inmates that had sued the governor. And one of the reasons that the mentioned abuses that occur here is probably retaliation for that. That includes half rationing the people's food, turning off the air conditioning for days, tying them to their beds, chaining them to their beds, bright lights have been on morning and night, and putting everybody inside a holding cell and contaminate them with known officers that were infected. This is part of a privatized correctional prison system, which is to enslave minorities for profit, have mass incarceration for money. This has been studied by Professor John Livingston at NCCU in Durham, also Professor Cayette from the same university. The other thing we're talking about now is that we have so much law enforcement that are members of hate groups. First from Birth of a Nation, which the Klan was used as law enforcement in the movie, over down to the Union. By this, they put, Jim Crow said you had to be supervising the normally criminals. So everybody went into law enforcement in the South. This portrayal is seen also in birth of a nation to why courthouses have Confederate statues in front of them to show that the Southern law, not Northern law, resides here. Because of this, we need to have the FBI do a background check on all wardens, DAs, judges, and chiefs of police and sheriffs to see if they have any connections to these organizations. One of the major reasons.
Mr. Longman, thank you for your comments. I know we're a little rough there getting underway, but your 2 minutes have now expired. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Next, we have Sam Robinson of Cary. Let's try Amy Alphin of Mount Olive.
Ms. Alvin, we can see that you're on. Can you unmute yourself? We're not hearing you.
Unmute.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have the unique perspective of having a father who is currently incarcerated with a long sentence, and he has a chance at parole. And since he's been in for such a lengthy time, I've had opportunity to advocate for men for recognition of a religious faith group, recognizing the positive impact it has on lives. And I've come to know several inmates who also have similarly long sentences, but they do not have the same hope at parole that my father does. And because these men have been in for so long, we've come to know their stories. And a classic example might be Christopher Dion Gaddis. He was a first-time offender and he received a life sentence. And despite years of reconciliation with victim's family and even the advocating of family members on his behalf for leniency and the chance at parole, has been denied. And what it's come to our attention is that since there's such a disproportionate number of colored individuals who are in prison with life sentences and they do not have a chance at parole in North Carolina at this time, they don't have the opportunity to demonstrate their full rehabilitation, and they don't have the hope at restoration in society. There are states who have returned parole to their state system. And one example is in New Jersey. And it was people of color who were the greatest impacted at the chance at receiving parole. And statistics have shown over time that lifers that earn their chance at parole have the lowest rate of recidivism. And so for this reason, I'm just asking if it can't be done now to bring relief through returning parole.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alphin.
Thank you.
Next, we have BJ Council.
Hi. My name is BJ.
Yes, hi, we hear you, so go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Transparency and ease of filing complaints. Agencies making it easy to file complaints online and in person. Posting policies and procedures online available, making it available for public review. Annual reports of complaints, both internally and externally. Hiring, reviewing hiring processes in the agencies to make sure there aren't obstacles that could impact having a more diverse applicant pool. Training, state mandated basic law enforcement training that reflects the new 21st century policing and philosophy. I believe the task force is promoting something like communication skills, cultural diversity, just to name a few. The conversation is national police standards. Maybe North Carolina can lead the way and do state policing standards and take the lead on that. Also, I'm not sure if this task force is considering that, but consideration on utilizing Miranda warnings with juveniles that make it easier for them to understand their rights. King County, Washington State implemented a new warning for juveniles in September of 2017. And I'm sure with the law enforcement personnel on the board, you have already looked at PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, International Association of Chief Police, and of course Noble. And then the other organization, the Leadership Conference Education Fund, which has a report and toolkit for creating a new era of public safety, which promotes the toolkit and report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Art Beeler. Let's try Roseanne Teniente from Lillington.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Fantastic. Hi there. My name is Roseanne Teniente. I live in Lillington in Harnett County. And basically, my public comment is on what I think is a need for counties, if they have not already taken steps to establish local racial equity commissions. And so like local county partnerships comprised of leaders from law enforcement, but also other sectors such as health and public health, education, housing and economic development. In Harnett County, after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, our county commissioners made no comments except to condemn looting. And that was the priority that they were placing on racial equity after that. So I personally went to a commissioner meeting to present racial inequity data specifically for Harnett County. And after the meeting, one of the county commissioners told me that the issue is that we need to, he basically made some really divisive comments and did not assume any responsibility for issues that are going on. And of course, it's not directly him, but it's just when you're a leader, you need to take responsibility in these issues that are happening in your community. So but I think counties will need funding to be able to do this. I would love to see data profiles on racial inequity in individual counties. I found so many inequities in Harnett County, from maternal equity, educational equity, housing, the percentage of Black homeowners is woefully under the percentage of the population of Black residents in Harnett County. And those are just a few examples. I presented dozens of different examples on racial inequity, and it just seems that this is something that maybe Harnett has never really focused on in the past. So so any state level funding or that could be provided to establish.
Sorry to cut you off, but your 2 minutes has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Stanley Sun of Durham.
There we go.
Morning,
Mr. Sun?
everyone.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Stanley Sun. I'm working for the Duke Center for Criminal Justice and Professional Responsibility this summer and will be making comments on its behalf. The center's work is primarily post-conviction representation, Racial bias afflicts our legal system in many ways, especially for communities of color, but I want to highlight two issues in particular. People of color are disproportionately convicted of a crime they did not commit and disproportionately sentenced longer for crimes they're found guilty of. Last week, the task force recommended banning chokeholds and implementing a duty to intervene, both of which are good forward-looking steps, but we must also look backwards to undo the injustices that have already occurred. Racism is not a recent phenomenon. The line of racial inequities in our state is long, so we must first look back and assess whether convictions obtained against and sentences imposed on those already incarcerated are fair and free of any discriminatory influences, including over-policing in communities of color, disproportionate charging or sentencing as a result of race, or other unacceptable unfairness leading to conviction. This effort will not be easy, but it must be undertaken to rebuild trust with marginalized and often targeted communities. We must also hold state actors accountable for misconduct. Investigations into law enforcement misconduct must be done expeditiously with transparency and by impartial investigators from an outside agency. In post-conviction cases, if misconduct by the state is alleged, an independent investigation must be conducted before prosecutors can argue that the conduct was innocent or mistaken. Our experience is that these arguments are often made with no goal other than upholding the conviction. This subverts justice and erodes trust. So for these reasons, we thank you today for your time, and we cannot move forward as a society unless we're willing to look backwards.
Thank you, Mr. Sun, for those comments.
Next, we have Ashley Long.
Ms. Long, we can see that you've joined us. Can you unmute yourself? We're not hearing you.
Okay,
there we go.
I got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak about the injustice of Ronnie Long today. Ronnie has been wrongfully imprisoned here in North Carolina since May 10th of 1976. That's 16,150 days. Mr. Attorney General, you know this case very well, but your office continues to defend injustice. To this day, there is no physical evidence linking Ronnie to the crimes he is wrongfully convicted of. The only evidence the state has is a contaminated cross-racial eyewitness identification. We know today how unreliable eyewitness identification is. The state withheld exculpatory evidence. This is beyond dispute. And the state has admitted a rape kit was collected and that they do not know what happened to it or where it is today. How do you have a rape case without a rape kit? Asked Judge Thacker last March. 43 fingerprints were collected from the crime scene and only disclosed in 2015. These fingerprints do not match Ronnie Long. Race also played a factor in the conviction, as he was convicted by an all-white jury vetted in part by law enforcement. This should be an easy case, but North Carolina does not like looking backwards and righting past wrongs. This must be changed. And that change can begin by the Attorney General's office discontinuing its defense of a clearly unfair and wrongful conviction. End the suffering of an innocent man today. Thank you for your time, and free Ronnie Long.
Thank you for your comments.
We are going to try Mr. Art Beeler again.
Mr. Beeler, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? Should be.
There we go.
There.
Can you hear me now?
We hear you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Earls, and thank you, Attorney General Stein. It's my pleasure to talk to the group this morning. I have over 45 years of experience in criminal justice, but I want to target one area, and that's to reduce the incarceration gap and to stop the incarceration recycling. We know that we can get people in prison. We know that more prisoners are of color than white. We also know that it's tough to get out after they get out. There are 4 areas I want to talk about that I think the task force can work on. One is reducing or making sure that collateral consequences for employment have a nexus to public safety. The second is to help develop a curriculum for occupational education using community colleges and hopefully some sort of Pell Grant. The third is to look at people of color for having job skills. And the fourth is, I can't remember right now, Your Honor. The issues are all detailed, and I wrote a written statement which has been submitted to your group because of the time limits. The one thing that I would like to state so heavily is that we get them in the prison, we might give them treatment, we might give them education, but once they get out, we almost destine them for failure from things like collateral consequences of employment and other collateral consequences, and the ability to keep the job because they have no work skills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I assure you we will review your written submission as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Thomas Mayer.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Good morning.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're doing and the time you're giving to everybody. I'm Tom Maher. I used to be the director of the Indigent Defense Services. I see that my successor is involved in this opportunity, which I think is great, and that we've got people working in public defense on this. I wanted to address two issues briefly. One is just the overall importance of public defense to any effort you make. That if you are going to have robust ability to pay hearings, if you're going to have the type of bail or pretrial release system that we all hope we should have, you've got to have the lawyers who have the time and the resources and the skill to represent the clients. And for years and years, North Carolina's public defense system has been underfunded. The public defenders workload study shows that they are understaffed, carrying more cases than they should. IDS has done studies on the rates of pay for the private assigned counsel. They're barely covering their overhead. And obviously in the time of our current economic crisis, that becomes more of a problem. So much of what you're working on will only work if there is a strong defense function, and that means providing resources for public defense. The other aspect of ability to pay, which some people have already addressed, is the bail situation. Ability to pay fines and fees and restitution is important, but making decisions on pretrial release that don't hold people based on their economics is incredibly important. You should look to what's going on in Alamance County under the consent decree there. Certainly as a model for a really well done system is Harris County, Texas, where most people don't even appear in front of a judge because of the nature of the offense. They're immediately released, and the time is spent on the cases that need the time, and public defenders are involved. And so kind of tying the two together, I would really love to see a system in which people appear to have their pretrial release determined, have a lawyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We really appreciate you joining us.
Next, we have Sarah McPherson.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Oh, very good. Thanks so much for having me. I just want to offer some sincere gratitude for each member of this task force for the hard work that you all are doing. I'm just so grateful to be from North Carolina and to be a part of a state where we are looking into racial injustice. I am a prosecutor from southeastern North Carolina, from beautiful Brunswick County. I was raised here in the rural part of southeastern North Carolina, and I wholeheartedly support legislation that promotes diversionary programs, but also having the privilege of being educated at North Carolina Central University School of Law, I had the privilege of going through a 2-day race equity program. And during that experience, what I learned was some things that I did not know about myself and about my own tendencies that lean towards white supremacy and racism for myself. And I submit to you that racism is not, it is a learned behavior, and it's one that not most folks remember learning. It's almost like walking. We don't remember that. We just know that we walk every day. And so the racist policies evolved from racist leadership. And I feel that it's very important for us to start having some of these very uncomfortable conversations. And through doing that, which you all are opening the door for us to do that now, but I submit that awareness has to be created around the implicit biases that exist. I spend a lot of time across the board trying to bridge the gap. And I think a lot of the issue is awareness. I think that race equity training is key, because until folks change their hearts, we really are going to have a difficult time moving forward with the important legislations and the other things that we have to attack in this sensitive issue.
Thank you so much for your observations.
Next, we have Bonnie Bruce.
Ms. Bruce, we can't hear. Oh, there we go. We should be able to hear you now.
Well, I should say good afternoon, but thank you all for allowing me to speak. I find this very informative, and my main perspective is seeing these groups and your group addressing the bias and the racism of our justice system and the imperfections of it. But I would also like to see you all, who I feel like are experts on possibly the criminal mind or the criminal journey to incarceration, is to get to the core of the issue, which is these young people who are choosing to commit crimes and being able to keep them out of the prison system to begin with. We have very capable people. I've sat in courtrooms and watched young people, black and white, be dealt with by judges in ways that I feel like they could have benefited more from perhaps community service rather than sitting in jail and stagnating and things like that. So I feel like there's a big difference in the perception that so much of this is racism, where I feel like, in all honesty, there's a lot of individual choices that are being ignored that the person themselves is making. And I feel like to some degree this has to do with a spirit of perhaps defeatism that they have been engendered with themselves, and they need a sense of more self-empowerment and hope that they can affect their lives positively, because they're actually the one who made these choices to begin with, where they are the ones who actually did commit these crimes, as to why they committed them, and what we can do in our communities to create opportunities for these young people to be able to enjoy life and see that there's hope and see that they can respect themselves with the choices that they make, rather than becoming part of their own problem. And, you know, I want to see these young people empowered.
I'm so sorry to cut you off, but your 2 minutes has expired. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those observations.
We are going to try Ms. Sidrahana one more time.
Thank you. Ms. Hannah, we can see you there. Can you speak and see if we can hear you?
Yes.
A little better. Why don't you start? And we'll see.
Thank you for this opportunity and consideration. Can you hear me clearly? Are you just unable to hear me?
There seems to be a lot of feedback. I really appreciate you trying to join us, but it's just not seeming to work. Ellen, do we have anyone else?
We have no one else on the line, but I was asked by Sam Robinson, who is having connectivity issues, to read his statement aloud, if you would allow it.
So you have a written statement from him?
I do, from an individual whose signal cut out, but was signed up to speak.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sam Robinson. I'd like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share our experiences and our comments with the group today. I have so many thoughts, ideas, and constructive steps to share, but I know I only have 2 minutes. I will focus on 2 things, being short holds and other pressure moves that are killing citizens. I think all these maneuvers and holds should be banned by police departments in North Carolina and at the federal level. I think we can do more to teach our police force how to interact with citizens and subdue citizens without putting pressure on blood vessels and arteries. I think all these maneuvers and holds should be banned. I think we can do more to teach the police force how to interact with citizens and subdue citizens. Second, I would like to suggest and ask the committee and those in law enforcement and our state legislature to reject any and all federal troops being sent to our state. It has now come out that these so-called federal troops are doing nothing more than Blackwater. As you see in Portland, they have eroded the Constitution. I urge the listeners and the panel to reject any and all federally funded troops entering our state under the premise of security and order. Thank you, Sam Robinson.
All right. Well, it is noon, and first a huge thank you to Ellen for making all this work so smoothly for us. And then I really am enormously grateful to all of the task force members who have so kindly and generously given up your time to hear from the public, and a huge thank you to all the members of the public who joined us and who gave us a lot to think about. So Josh, did you want to make any final statements?
Exactly what you just said. Thanks, Ellen. Really thank the task force. Everybody was really engaged, and I appreciate you sharing your time. And most importantly, thank the public for offering such a diverse array of really compelling ideas for us to chew on in these coming weeks and months. So thanks so much.
All right, so I guess our next step will be some work group meetings, and we will be in touch about the next public hearing opportunity. All right, thank you all.
Take care, everybody.